hope that you are somehow with us. I'm going to go ahead and get started and welcome you all to Chapter Endnotes, where we're going to discuss Heartburn by Nora Ephron. Yay, Heartburn. Well, I am going to kind of suggest that you, where did I put mine? Somewhere I have around here. Oh, if you happen to have, like me, you buy this in bulk at Costco, even though your good friend's a nurse and she says you're tearing up your stomach, I firmly believe it's worth the investment to for all the heartburn I've had over the years. This is one of my favorite food groups, and it has helped me. But for this book, I say you can throw away your Pepto, because it's humor that Ephron uses to get us through the pain of betrayal. And that's what this book is about, with a recipes for Lillian Hellman's brisket thrown in for good measure. Amazing book. Was obviously made into a film starring Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson. And I've heard, no pun intended, that Meryl Streep does the audiobook. So what a treat.
She does. I listened to it. She's great.
Oh, I can only
wonderful.
I can only imagine what a treat that would be. Wow. 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 Okay. So I am just going to ask you to jump in and tell me what you thought of this book. Have you read Ephron? Maybe seen a film, but have you read Ephron before?
Yes.
Okay.
I read this book decades ago.
Oh, you
Crazy
have?
Salad, was that one of the other ones?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I have a story about reading Ephron. When I suggested this book, and that's a whole other story if you want to get into. When I suggested that we read Heartburn, I thought, oh, I'm so excited because I've never read Nora Ephron. And then I realized, I have read Nora Ephron, because I remember I read her book. I remember nothing. Not only did I read, I remember nothing. I gave a whole gave a review group, and I remember nothing, which just goes to show you how she gets it, right? I mean, it's like unbelievable. Okay. So we know this is based on a true story, and I thought it was Bob Woodward because I always confuse the two. But it's, I believe, Carl Bernstein, to whom she was married, and the character Mark is not so loosely based on.
Yeah, right.
And she is our Rachel, right? So I am just going to plunge in and say we have our protagonist, who is Mark Feldman. I believe that's his last name in the book.
Yeah.
And he is the one who is messing around with Thelma Rice. Our poor main character, who happens to be 7 months pregnant and also taking care of their 2-year-old son, discovers this affair because I believe she opens up a children's book and sees the inscription. Oh my God. Ouch. And starts to put 2 and 2 together. And she flees to New York. She's in DC. She flees to New York to her father's house and tries to, figure out what the hell's going on here. And in spite of it all, she loves him. That is kind of that tension that plays throughout the entire book that is like can be so true. Like, even though someone has so made your life so miserable, why can't you walk away? Or, a greater question, why do we choose the people we choose in our life who end up causing us such heartburn? We don't know the answer, but this is heartburn is an question. So we have Rachel, who is 38 years old. She's a food writer and a mother, and she is married to this columnist. What's interesting about the Mark character to me is if we kind of look at the 30,000-foot view and look at this book in 2022, looking back at a book that was written in 83, is Mark represents a kind of peekaboo into what will become social media. She says on page 89, if you have the pink book, 89, she says, I sometimes felt it as if I were living with a cannibal. Things barely finished happening before Mark was chewing away at them, trying to string them out, turn them upside down, blow them up into 185 words for tomorrow's newspaper. Sometimes when he was really worried about to write about next, he would sit at dinner time, his eyes darting desperately around the room. Was there a column in the salt and pepper shakers, the paper napkins, the Cuisinart food processor? Have you noticed how hard it is to peel a hard-boiled egg? Yes, yes. You think there's anything in it, he'd say? Or have you noticed that English muffins don't taste as good as they used to? Yes, I'd say. You think there's anything to it, he said. Okay, here's the rant about social media. People, this has so become another tool of communication in our lives that we've kind of interrupted real life so we can now narrate it and post it and share it with the world, like pause and then, or we just interact without the real human interaction, or it's become so enmeshed in our interaction that we can't tell the difference. But what Nora Ephron does is she's commenting on the idea that all of a sudden your personal life may end up as in a column the next day. Today it's that next second, or in real time. That blew me away. Another way of looking at this book as kind of capturing the social context of its time in 1983. Thought it was brilliant. Who is our Mark having an affair with? Her name is Thelma Rice. She's known for her extramarital affairs in DC. She's married to Jonathan, a State Department official who we find out will bug his own home because he wants his wife back too. Poor Jonathan. And she actually finds him, she runs up the driveway 7 months pregnant into the backyard of Thelma and Jonathan's home. And where is our State Department official who's supposed to be in charge of the Middle East?
The bushes.
He's like in the bushes looking to see what's going on between his wife, and Mark. It's kind of that's just a snippet of scenes in this book that make it so, I mean, who sleeps anymore? So at 3:00 in the morning, I'm sitting in bed reading this book and laughing to myself, reading this stuff and thinking, I can even see Nora writing about some postmenopausal woman in bed at 3:00 in the morning, laughing about, a book. So, it was like so meta, like everything was so real. My aunt, when I told her we were going to read Heartburn, she said, oh my gosh, Nora Ephron is like talking to your best friend. When you read her book, it's written in such a personal way. Like McCarthy, when we read the group, it was like a documentary. She held back, but Nora is right there with you. Like you can almost want to say to her, you got something in your teeth. Like you almost it's that personal. Another character. Oh, and by the way, I love when she she starts to spread a rumor about Thelma that she has herpes. That was like hysterical. Okay. And then we have the Seagulls. And I think everyone in their life has a couple who has a friend who's just that friend. And there's something about the name, just the wording of the Seagulls. They're just such a nice couple. They try to catch her in the fall. They're true friends. And they try to help her, patch up her marriage. And she explains, I believe it's on page 106. Let's see. Is it page 106? Yeah, it is, but it's too much to read. I had to highlight so much in this book that I ran out of color. I had to check the color of the highlighter because I bled it dry with all the funny bits. But I just love the seagulls. I thought they were, even though they were secondary characters, I felt like I knew them. I felt like I could go to Ohio with them and go apple picking and hear their very Eastern kind of sensibility, take on, the acquaintance of, Worthington, Ohio, or, Delaware's Orchard or something like that. Okay. Then there is the character of Vera, the therapist. And what I love about Vera, the therapist, is what Rachel says about Vera. She says, Vera has a good marriage. She says, sometimes I wish you and Nicola would just get a divorce because your marriage is very hard on the rest of us. I mean, this is just funny things. Okay, then there are her parents, which when we talk about the bio, I will get more into. But her parents, her mother in real life is named Phoebe. I believe her mother in the book is named Bibi. But they, I just love them because, they invested in Tampax. Okay. I just want to say it again because it's so fun. They invested in Tampax, and then they're worried that the new, the gold diggers that come into her parents' lives as they age are going to rob them of their fortune that they made in Tampax, which indeed occurs. I don't even know if they still even have that brand, because the last time I walked down that aisle, it looked like something out of like neon. Like I thought, oh, these were not the Stay Free maxi pads that I remember. But anyway, I digress. Very much like Nora digresses when all of a sudden she starts giving a recipe or not giving a recipe for her vinaigrette. Two other characters that, that kind of represent the characters that we have in our lives. We're honestly talking here. We all have that best friend, I hope. And we have Betty in that regard. And then we also have the policeman who she kind of like, flirts with after the scene, after the holdup. Moving forward to the title, what was interesting about the reviews of this book was that the reviewer felt it was important to make the point, some of the reviews felt it was important to make the point that heartburn just wasn't about pregnancy and getting heartburn. Are you that shallow that we really think so? Nora Ephron is going to write a book about just the horrors of heartburn. Like, obviously, this is a metaphor, you doofus, but whatever. Again, when we look at who is reviewing books at that time, I will cut slack, but I thought that was very interesting. She mentions heartburn very early in the book, at page 45. She says, she talks about, I believe it's page 45. Yeah, she talks about heartburn. Let's see. You look more idiotically out of proportion than ever in your life. She's pregnant. You feel such nostalgia for the scrawny and perfect body you left behind, and by the common sense knowledge that you will eventually end up shaped approximately the way you began it all, but obliterated by the discomfort of not being able to sleep on your stomach, and of the ping ever so slightly every time you cough, and of leaking droplets from your breast onto your good silk blouse. And then suddenly you find yourself an expert in mysteries you had expected to not comprehend until middle age. Mysteries like swollen feet, varicose veins, neuritis, neuralgia, acid indigestion, and heartburn that seemed to me as I lay in bed was what I was suffering from. And that summed up the whole mess. Heartburn, compound heartburn, double-digit heartburn, terminal heartburn. I mean, can you imagine 7 months pregnant and your schmuck of a husband you find? I mean, it still stabs me when I think about it. And it stabs me worse because it happened. Okay. Moving forward. First, like we all tend to do, well, I won't speak for all of you because you're all amazing, strong, self-realized women. I am still obviously a neurotic, psychotic mess, but you blame yourself, right? You blame yourself. Try to figure out where you went wrong. And then you analyze the relationship itself. And we evolve with her as she starts to broaden the crime scene of what went wrong. And that's where we get to her thinking about why do men choose certain women? Why do women choose certain men? And then she basically says, everyone else on earth is the person you're never supposed to marry. Or, she makes these grand, very funny statements. The style in this book, and it's not original when I say this, is written like a recipe, because through the book, she peppers in, recipes, humor, flashbacks, optimism, pessimism. She adds all these things. It's very well balanced, and it makes for a very fast, honest, conversational read. But then she does something so fun for me as someone who likes to write. Is I love when writers break the wall and they speak directly to the reader. I love Dear Reader, because I'll go, oh, who, me? Yes. Okay. Yes. Right. Yeah. You want me, my opinion? But she takes it a step further. Not only is she very Dickens with her Dear Reader, she starts to ask us as the reader if she should include information in the book she's writing. And in this case, she's talking about her group, no pun intended on the last book we read, because the first rule of the group is you don't group outside the group, right? But so here she even mentions that as she's walking from the subway to her group therapy meeting with someone she met on the subway from the group, whatever. And she says, under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't mention my group. There's a real problem in dragging a group into a book. Okay, so now we're here. You're writing with what's the problem? Well, because you have to introduce 6 new characters, bang, 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 6 new characters who are never going to be mentioned in any really essential way, but who nonetheless have to be sketched in simply because I can't really leave out this story of what happened to my group. So here we are, as writers with her, wondering ethically, do we mention the group? Do we not mention the group? Everyone's not supposed to talk about them. And I found that brilliant. I just found that brilliant. And it got the pink highlighter. It was so brilliant. She also does something very interesting. If I can just go back to the idea of metaphor, it's the diamond ring that her husband gave her when their first child was born. He gives her this ring, which we know ends up lost. And I did not see a holdup coming. I knew something was suspicious on the subway, on the train, and we'll get to that, but I did not see it coming. So when the ring is found, its diamonds are loose. And I don't know if you thought that was over the top or, a little schmaltzy or too much. I love that. Thought it was just enough. And so when she takes it to the jeweler, the place where, everything represents, everything at a jeweler represents commitment, financially, emotionally, etc. And he reveals that, there happens to be this emerald necklace that also was purchased by her husband. And he has this revelation. This is the stuff of real life. Women do go to the jewelers with the ring to have it fixed, to pawn it, to exchange it for a bigger stone, whatever it is. These things happen. But to have that twist in the plot, to me, it was beautiful. It really was beautiful.
Well, it was another metaphor.
Yeah.
The loose stone was the marriage falling apart.
Yeah. I don't know. That was so touching to me. And, we all bring our own baggage to each book, right? And I have a friend who went through a divorce and she had a ring and she needed the money. So I went with her to the jeweler and he gave her cash. And then we had to put it in her purse and walk down the street to the bank And neither of us had ever seen that kind of cash in our life. So we walked arm in arm with her purse over her shoulder and so squished together, because knowing our luck, particularly mine, we get hit by a bus or held up, I don't know what, drop the purse and go everywhere, like the Alfredo that went on the highway a few days ago, but and the whole idea, like, should I do it? And I'm like, yes, you should do it. You need the money, and the whole thing of going to the bank and it was so emotional. And Ephron captured that. And I just loved that. And I hadn't thought about that experience in years. And that's what reading does. If only more people would read. Okay, I'm almost done. And I just want to talk about the nerdy part of this book, which was, when I read this, I thought of a book I read years ago. I think her name's Elizabeth Ehrlich, and the name of the book is Miriam's Kitchen. And it was this book where this woman starts to find her mother's recipes, and she starts to, make them, and she ends up keeping kosher, which is a way to observe religious rules in your kitchen. As a result of this book, she goes on this whole spiritual journey of her mother's life, etc. And I thought, you know what, there is something to this about food and explaining characters and storytelling. And wait a minute, maybe cookbooks are actually novels. Like, this is what I do also at 3:00 in the morning. So, and I thought about Martha Stewart and her books, like Barefoot Contessa. I have one of her cookbooks. I've read the whole thing. Maybe I've cooked from it once, but it's like a story. And then I have another cookbook called Cookwise by Shirley something, like she's a chemist. And I've read that whole book, and I've made one recipe for chocolate chip cookies. I make them much better now because of her. That's the only reason why I'd have Crisco in the house. But, that was like a story too. I found this article. So I'm like, well, what's going on here? What's happening? So I found this article by Adam Gopnik, 2007, from the New Yorker. And it was way too sophisticated for me, but this was the takeaway. First of all, he gives 4 types of ways that authors use food in storytelling, of which I only understood 3. So that's all I can give you, because he's so much smarter. But anyway, first, we're all familiar with food to understand context. So think of, Middlemarch, any novel from like the, 18th, 19th century, where they have a claret before dinner, right? And so we get an idea of who those people are, right? Or the fish and chips, whatever. Then there is food that is served by the author to characters in order for us to understand who the character is. And I thought of Proust in the Madeleine. It's not just that he loved those Madeleines because he had them growing up. It's the whole idea of this man, Charles Swann, who wants to get back. He so craves nostalgia and wants to get back to who he is. And it's this cookie that represents that whole thing. And then we have books like Heartburn, where the characters are cooking as part of the story. And how does Ephron use it? Well, she deflects, or she goes off on a tangent, like we all do, and gives a recipe. And that's how Ephron uses it. And I would also argue Miriam's Kitchen uses it the same way. In a review, it says, not in a review, this is from Adam Gopnik. So I'm quoting, Heartburn, novels about the inadvertent mayhem that a man can inflict on a woman in heartburn. The recipes there serve as a joke about what a food writer novel would write, and as a joke on novel writing itself by someone who anticipates that she will not be treated like a real novelist. Right? We've been there before with Mary McCarthy recently. But yeah, so, some of the reviews for this book, it was taken down a notch because, he's a food writer, that kind of thing. All right.
But she
Now,
was already self-denigrating in order to counter that.
yeah. And that's sophisticated. Like, and we get that. We're lucky we get that. We read the book, we're analyzing it. But someone who would review it, read it in the 1980s would kind of like, oh, that was a cute book, right? But she is doing so much more than that. I actually found, I found online the review. Here's how high tech we are today, ladies and gentlemen. I will now show you a copy I made because computer wasn't cooperating. All right, so this is a copy I made and shrunk of the New York Times when they reviewed the book, and they stuck it in the living section, and it's called The Art of the Novel as Cookbook. And here is the review. So I believe she is right below the fold, which is not bad real estate when you're a writer.
So who was the reviewer?
I can't read it because I made it too damn small.
I'll look it up.
Thank you. Yeah, it's New York Times. I believe it's in February 83. Okay, so then what I did was I made it like, because I'm so sophisticated, right? So then I went to the Jump, and they really give it a very long, no one would have the patience today. Remember how big the Times used to be? Like no one would even have the patience today to get through all this, right? But anyway, and then they print, it says, they have a tiny little article that says from or for a literary lunch. So they print one of her recipes. No, I can't see it because it's too small, but from the book, for you to go ahead and make from the novel, which I thought was, just a great piece overall. But because, I also, it's like squirrel, like I'm so easily distracted. Then I saw the ads in the newspaper for what stuff costs. So I have to share that if you're from New York, maybe you know the name of this place.
Oh, yes.
Is it Grizziti?
Christides.
Grizziti. Okay, so let me just tell you how much stuff costs then. All right. So a quarter cut up chicken, $1.99 a pound, right?
Oh, much.
A pound of butter, $2. Coke, 99 cents. Folgers. When was the last time you had Folgers? Okay, $1.99 for the whole can. For the whole can. Sparkle. Do you remember that? Sparkle paper towels, 69
Oh, yeah.
cents a roll. Seal test ice cream, $1.99 for a real half gallon. None of this shrink.
Oh, yes, they've shrunk them.
Yeah. And then I went to the next page because, completely fallen down a rabbit hole. And there was another store called Red Apple.
Red Apple, yeah.
Okay. So here we go, Red Apple. Turkey breast, $1.99 a pound. They're competing with Grizziti's, also chicken, $1.99 a pound.
Christides was much more high end than Red Apple, though.
I thought it looked very sophisticated with that font. Just saying. Then they also have Folgers the same price, but Chips Ahoy. Now, I don't know about you, but I have been watching Oreos rise over the years. I first started buying Oreos at Publix, buy one, get one, $1.99. That's how low it would go. Then I went to $2.99. I stopped. Chips Ahoy, $1.99. If you go into Publix today and go down the aisle, Oreos, which should also be a food group, are like $5.99 a box.
Yeah, and there's so many fewer of them.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but they have 58,000 varieties of them.
Yeah, but I don't want Halloween Oreos. I just want a Oreo. Anyway, so a Minute Maid frozen orange juice concentrate, 2 for $5. I mean, it just. Well, I'm doing this book discussion again tonight at the San Marco Books and More. If you would like to see, I will bring this with me. Just bring a magnifying.
Christides was one of the first supermarket, well, I hardly call it a supermarket, a grocery store that had rotisserie chickens.
Oh, really?
And my memory is that they were 99 cents a piece.
Wow.
Wow. Wow, that does sound very sophisticated for the early,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
1980s.
Can I ask a question? Did anybody read Lessons in Chemistry yet? Because it's on the top 10. Okay, it's very similar to this. There's a
Oh.
story behind it, and she becomes a person who is like a foodie on TV doing it. So
Okay.
you may enjoy it. I loved it. And my group, the one similar to the one that we talked about last time, is in Pittsburgh this week, vacationing. And that's the book that they all read so they can discuss there.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting because I know that book has been very popular, and I tend to shy away from living authors. And I knew that a lot of other people would review it. There would be book clubs that would have it. Heartburn, to me, I thought, okay, that's where I want to go.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's very
So
good.
saying
And I
that-
just read Left on something, whatever, Left on 10th.
yeah, that's supposed to
And
be,
that's her sister wrote it.
yes.
And so she goes into the family structure too. So you get a little bit of the background of both of the sisters.
Right.
Right.
Curious.
I have questions about her
Can I mention-
relationships with men.
Can I mention,
Okay, let's go. Gloria,
Gloria.
we have Gloria, Phyllis, and Diana.
I was curious whether there was a huge backlash against her for, revealing all this stuff. Basically attacking Bernstein and whoever his love interest was in real life.
Oh, it says the attorney, I will answer, Gloria. Lawsuits were threatened. But never happened. And let me give you a little background on the real Thelma and the real Mark.
I was trying to figure out who the real Thelma was.
Oh, I will tell you. It is the Baroness J of Paddington of the city of Westminster.
Oh, geez.
But I jump ahead. Nora's first marriage ended after 9 years of divorce. In 76, she marries Carl Bernstein. 79, they have their toddler son, Jacob. We know she was pregnant with her second son, Max, when she discovers Bernstein's affair with their mutual friend, married British journalist Margaret Jay, daughter of former British Prime Minister James Callaghan. This obviously inspires a book. With a husband who was, quote, capable of having sex with a Venetian blind.
A Venetian blonde or Venetian blind?
Either one. Thelma is based on Margaret Jay, and she looks like a giraffe with, quote, big feet. Bernstein threatened to sue over the book and the film, Gloria, but never did. So a little bit about the Baroness, because I'm so willing to go there and I'm so shallow. In 1961, this woman marries a man, James, I believe it's James Callaghan, she marries a journalist named Peter Jay. He is very involved also in politics, and it's all who you know. Nepotism prevails, and he is appointed the British ambassador to the United States, which brings him to Washington in 1979. If you are a fan of The Thick of It or have seen the film The Thick of It, there is a great scene of a Washington party with James, is it Gandolfino, Tony Soprano, he's since passed away. But anyway, he stars in it. And there is a Washington party where I envision Nora, Rachel, Mark, all of them meeting Peter and the Baroness. Well, she wasn't the Baroness at the time. Anyway, they meet and they have an affair. Whoever, the real people or the fake people, they all have the affair. And it becomes very highly publicized. A lot of people find out about it. I don't know if Ephron spreads the rumor about her having herpes or not. Either way, it's so funny in the book. I just love it. Okay, so moving
What
forward.
I was wondering was not the lawsuits, but whether there was sort of a cultural disapproval of her for spilling the beans in that way.
Well, she
That
went to California and found her ilk there, didn't she? Didn't she move to California, Ephron, to write and be in the movies? I mean, do the movies?
But I don't know, Gloria, if we want to think about like how Mary McCarthy was ostracized by her contemporary writers. I don't know. That's a very, very good question. I do know professionally, she decided like to direct because why am I trying to appeal male directors to pick up my scripts and make screenplays out of them? I'll just do it because female, again, early 80s. But I don't know the answer to that question. She definitely was a troublemaker, right? Like she even was critical of Betty Friedan. Like she did not hold back, right? So I don't know, but I'm guessing maybe a little, but I can't answer. Because I have no.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I don't know if did anybody else watch the documentary that her son made in 2015, Everything is Copy. And it's very revealing. And in this documentary, Bernstein appears. And he seems very jovial about the whole thing. And he doesn't, because he made the stipulation that if he was going to be portrayed in a movie, and there are very few people who've been portrayed twice in movies. He's in Heartburn, played by Nicholson, and he's in the Watergate movie, played by what's his name, Rain Man.
Robert, Dustin
Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman. So he was very sanguine about it. And what I would like to focus in the discussion of this book is about format. And I always go to the New Yorker first when I look at a review of movies, and there is a review in there that says Heartburn is the ideal audiobook because when you turn on and it's Meryl Streep reading it, you know she is turning to you, and it's her voice is so wonderful that you feel like it's one long comedy routine, stand-up comedy routine that Nora Ephron does for you, and she chooses to portray this as a terrible betrayal. And all of us who have been betrayed like that know the pain that she covers over, however, because she says, if I tell the story, I control the story. And she does. Everybody in that story is in her mercy.
Oh yeah,
and
true. Well put, Diana. Well put.
She's very, I would say, kind to Mark, Carl Bernstein, in a sense, but at the same time, she reveals him, and this is her sweet revenge. The fact that he's been revealed to all of this chatty Washington elite that he moves within, and there are pictures in the documentary, and everyone who's interested in Nora Ephron should watch that documentary. Everything is Copy, of the contemporary scene, the Washington scene, which she actually doesn't like because she's a New Yorker. She's a very Jewish New Yorker. And she says, Washington is so provincial. And maybe at the time it was. Today, of course, everyone thinks it's camp and it's very elite and it's wonderful and it's fashionable. But at the time, she says, you couldn't even find arugula, or you couldn't make a sorrel soup in Washington because you had to be in New York to have these delicacies. Anyway, she controls the story, and her revenge is wonderful. This book is her revenge.
Well, you sum it up so nicely. And even on the front cover, Diana, it says funny and touching proof that writing well is the best revenge, Chicago
Yeah.
Tribune.
Oh, yeah. I don't have the book because I read on Kindle. So, but that's good. That's
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And it was, it's supposed to be a very good documentary. I have not seen it yet, but if you
I
recommend it.
watched it on, you can watch it on Prime, Amazon Prime. Yeah.
Okay. But what you bring up, and Gloria, you bring up about these nuances about socially, how did this land socially, like,
He was
sociologically?
a hero. He wasn't just any old Washington guy.
Yeah. I did not realize anything about the provincial versus I didn't get any of that. New York, I just thought all of that was like a great place to live and you could get rugulach anywhere. And so that to me brought out another slice of time in American history that, I can understand better the different dynamics of those cities and liking one, not liking the other, etc. Did I read to you about what she had to say about the Eastern Shuttle? Okay.
No.
I think this is important and it plays on Diane's theme. We were talking about metaphors and Phyllis, we talked about the diamond ring. She brings up another metaphor that has to do, she hops on the plane and she leaves Washington for New York. And she sees, this is like a commute, almost like a bus commute, right? You see people that work during the day going back and forth. And you see the whole idea, the man in the gray flannel suit, these people who are so.
Yeah.
Then you add the whole idea of Pampers and wet ones, and it gives you a whole other aesthetic. But anyhow, she says, the Eastern Shuttle was almost a perfect reflection of the Puritan tradition in its attempt to make a virtue out of suffering, abstinence, and suffering and abstinence. It seemed fitting that one Eastern Shuttle flies from New York to Boston, where the Puritan tradition began, and the other flies New York to Washington, or those produced by that tradition are rewarded with the power to force the rest of the country to heel to it.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Things haven't changed. And
Nope.
And people's really mad about it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to leave it at that. But again, very, very astute.
Okay. I still have this question. I was interested because she skirts around it. She was definitely a woman of her era. She went from her father's house to her husband's home.
Yes.
She went from her husband's home, I think, back to her father's home. She went from there to Carl Bernstein. She leaves the marriage from Carl Bernstein and goes back to her father's house, although he is in and out of it.
Right.
And then when she finally leaves Bernstein, she goes to Richard in this book. This is a woman who has a job. She has a reputation. She has the wherewithal to take care of herself. And yet she is always attaching herself to these men. I can't figure that part out.
I can only offer my opinion. I think we're dealing with a very strong woman who likes sex, and these men offer that. And, they may, like hamsters too, named Mendel, but, they also, which can be, be cute at first, and then you want to kill him. But the whole book is like, why are we attracted to these people? Like every page should be like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
she could have gotten her own apartment husband and still done the same thing.
Yeah, but then you got to walk home. You got to do the walk of shame. I don't know. Kathy,
Oh,
would you like to
geez.
say, I hate to put you on the spot, but
That's okay. Yeah, I think, that's a very good question about, I think that you got to remember kind of when this was written, kind of thing. But even today, it's a theme. I think this whole, trying to find a man in her life and having her father as her backup all the time. I think, even though I think that was a theme that everyone got. That you needed to have a man in your life, that you needed to have security. And men, represented, they were the earners, they were the, and they represented security. And even though she, was a very bright and gutsy woman, she still was part of that, I hate to say this, sort of domesticated system that said, you have to define yourself by some sort of male in your life, and if her father was just her. Plus, I always kind of questioned too. I thought to myself, well, maybe she also, got accustomed to sort of a lifestyle, and she wanted to keep it. And also maybe, look, she's pregnant. She has 2 small children. I think that as she got older, she, broke away from that somewhat, she became a director. How many women directors were there?
Yeah, not many.
Not many.
Still are.
So I just don't think she had evolved. I don't think, kind of as far as her own development as being self-sufficient and self-sustaining. Plus, there was a lot of reasons to kind of do what was expected of you. So she was a contrast, similar to her writing, by the way. At times her writing is funny and edgy and so brilliant. Other times, she says simple things, really simple things, that you're like, oh, this is so simple, and she puts it so she doesn't try to impress anybody. She doesn't use any big words. She just puts a truth in there that's, that's there, and you look at that and you think to yourself, of course, that's sort of how you go. The interesting part, I think, when we're talking about books about food and how food played a part in it, I am reading Lessons in Chemistry, and I also read Crying in H Mart, and Crying in H Mart is a young Korean writer where she talks about her mother's food a lot through it. I did not like the food references in that book, and I didn't really enjoy that book. It was a New York Times bestseller, but I think it relates to another generation. I don't think it doesn't have. It's not the quality of writing, nor does it have. What I loved about Nora was it felt so real, and you felt so much like you were seeing a woman tell you a story that we all could relate to. Crying in H Mart, it was very confusing. I just didn't feel that way about the author.
okay.
But it's different. It hits different people and different generations differently. So, but I would say, Phyllis, that with this situation, I think she just, was still at a phase in her life where she did what was expected of her, somewhat.
Yeah, could I add something to that?
Please.
Sure.
Let's see, where are we? Yeah, I somehow I'm not on the right page here.
Well, we can hear you. And
Okay. In a way, I also think she was kind of a snob, that living below a certain lifestyle was just not in her. There's always mention of housekeepers and
Yes.
cooks and baby nurses, and so living below a certain lifestyle was just not in her. Remember that for her first divorce from Greenberg, her father wrote her a check for $3,000, and that made it possible for her to get the divorce. And this time it's the $15,000 ring, she says. And that's where I decided I can step out of this marriage and be on my own. In a sense, she needed the financial security, and she added that to moving in with her.
It'd be interesting. I mean, I guess in a way you could call this book, a very affluent woman's problems, played to, but by the, accompanied by the words tiniest violin, eek, 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 I feel really sorry for you. Because, New York City, Washington, D.C., Wellesley, the fortune made in Tampax, you're fine. I don't need to hear the complaint. I mean,
I don't understand she clearly already had a TV show and whatever. I don't understand the finances where she didn't have access to the money she earned, but he had access to buy an emerald necklace.
And a lot of other stuff. He was buying. He was the one spending a lot of money.
Well, he
And they were broke.
Necklace. He'd only
I
made
do not understand it, Gloria, because it's not addressed in the book at all because of that time period. Like,
Right.
I think that's where we're going with this, which is very interesting. Yeah.
I agree.
Learn aloud, name on the checking account, your name, Mrs. Harry Smith, like that's still all happening, right? That's still all happening. So, at that time period, time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But Phyllis, what you were saying about there on page 82, she's talking with Vera, who Vera tries through the metaphor with like the donkey and the crepe. She tries everything to convince Nora that, look at what's in front of you. He's an idiot. You need to leave. And Nora, Vera says, you picked him. Now we're talking about Charlie, because his neurosis mesh perfectly like yours. And she says to Vera, I love you, Vera, I truly do, but doesn't anything happen to you that you don't intend? Vera says, you picked him because you knew it wouldn't work out. You picked him because his neuroses matched perfectly with yours. You picked him because you knew he'd deprive you of the way your mother and father did. Obviously, Nora has been to therapy because this is nothing new to any of us, right? Unquote. And then she says, that's what they're always telling you one way or another. But the truth is that no matter whom you pick, it doesn't work out. The truth is, no matter whom you pick, your neuroses mesh perfectly and horribly. The truth is, it could be like a prayer that you would stand up and say, the truth is. Anyway, the truth is that no matter whom you pick, he deprives you. And then she says, quote, this is Vera. You pick the one person on earth you could have problems with. You pick the one person on earth who you shouldn't be involved with. And then Nora says to us, there's nothing brilliant about that. That's life. Every time you turn around, you get involved with one person, the one person on earth you shouldn't get involved with. Robert Browning's shrink probably said to him, so Robert, it's very interesting, no? Of all the women in London, you picked this hopeless invalid who has a crush on her father, unquote. Let's face it, everyone is the one person on earth you shouldn't get involved with. We all need that on a t-shirt. And if every therapist just put that on their door, they'd all go out of business.
That's how they all go away in August.
Yeah, that's the answer. And then she goes into exactly what she wanted in a man. And it was so incredibly silly and specific. I don't want to, monopolize.
Do we know a lot about what the first husband, who he was in real life, and was he really that crazy?
I couldn't find out. I couldn't find out that information. If anyone can, let me know.
Yeah,
Put it in
yeah,
the- Oh, go ahead, Diana.
yeah,
please.
I know a little bit. Yeah.
Because you used
he
to
is-
be married to him in another life. You were married to him in the
Yes,
early 70s, right?
he is in the documentary,
Oh,
and interestingly enough, he says there were never any hamsters. They're a pure invention. She made that up because it's so perfect for someone who is really a neat freak and who is very cautious, and someone she can make fun of. She pokes fun at him, and so this is a metaphor for how she considered him to be a neat freak and to be, just insufferable for her. So yeah.
Imagine having to get in front of a camera, get mic'd up, and have to say into the camera, there were never any hamsters. I mean, how low has your life gone? What does
That's priceless.
I feel so sorry for him. I mean, retractions are okay. Anyway, moving on. I have no idea where I was, but it looks like I'm looking on a page where it says bio. Do you want to go there? A little more about bio? Okay, so here we go. Okay, I'm gonna do like Carson would do, and I'm gonna give you the answer. So the answer is Heinrich Ibsen. Okay, here's the question. Why did she have trouble with men? Her parents, end of story. That's the end. Her parents.
Oh,
No,
I see.
her parents, Phoebe and Henry, were playwrights and screenwriters. They named Nora after the protagonist in the play.
The Doll's House.
House.
You wonder why she had a problem with men.
Oh,
How cool. I mean, that's like naming someone like, Lee Harvey Oswald. Like, why would you do that to your kid? But anyway,
But who doesn't have problem with men? Who doesn't have problems with men?
right.
well,
There's that
evidently
too.
Vera, because she has the perfect marriage with Niccolo. But anyway, but let me tell you a little more about her parents, because maybe if you're having problems with yours, or you look back on your life and feel, they were real shits. Au contraire, mon frere. In 1961, her parents wrote a play called Take Her, She's Mine. It was about the 22-year-old Nora and her letters from college. They wrote the script 6 weeks, sent it to their agent. Next thing you know, it's on Broadway. In 63, it's now a major motion picture starring James Stewart and Sandra Dee. So by the time she gets to Bernstein, who's writing about her in the paper, already she's a little PTSD. I should bend down that road, right? Okay, so, and here's some trivia. And if you see this trivia on Jeopardy and you win, we are splitting the winnings, because in this film, the supporting cast includes a coffeehouse singer by the name of Bob Denver.
No.
You can't make that up. Okay. All right.
I'll
So
say.
here's the plot. A Los Angeles attorney is overprotective toward his teenage daughter as she leaves home for college and to study art in Paris. Concerned over the letters that she has written describing her beatnik friends and activist beliefs, he travels to Paris to investigate her living conditions. Okay. I'm not done here, because if you cannot see the connections to the group, I will just say, can you see the connections to the group? Because there's one. All right. She goes to high school and dreams of being the next Dorothy Parker, because who wouldn't if you're that sophisticated and have those kind of parents? She credits her journalism teacher for supporting her wanting to be a writer. 1958, she graduates from Beverly Hills 90210, and she goes to Wesley College in Massachusetts. She graduates in 62 with a degree in poli-sci, tries to get a job. She works briefly as an intern, I'm sorry, at the White House with JFK. Saying nothing more because I just realized those implications. All right, so then she applies to be a writer at Newsweek, but they don't hire female writers. She takes a job as a male girl. She quits and takes part in a class action lawsuit against the magazine for sexual harassment. Sound familiar? There was a book called The Good Girls Revolt, How the Women of Newsweek Sued Their Bosses and Changed the Workplace by Lynn Povich. If that sounds familiar, in 2016, Amazon had a series called The Good Girls Revolt, all based on the lawsuit. Cool. She goes to work then for the New York Post. She breaks the story that Bob Dylan married Sandra Lowndes. I don't know. Anyway, evidently she was like a paparazzi person. Then she works for Esquire and writes a humorous essay about body image called A Few Words About Breasts. She is then established as the enfant terrible of new journalism. She does a scathing article about Betty Friedan for pursuing a feud with Gloria Steinem. Here is what she says about her education at Wellesley. Hold on tight. Wellesley, quote, turned out a generation of docile and unadventurous women, unquote. I think
Hillary Clinton.
Mary McCarthy. I think it ended up being meant to be that we read the group, which was written in the 60s about the 1930s.
30s.
And now look what we've just done with Heartburn. We've come forward a few decades. And have we come a long way, baby? As the Virginia Slims commercial said, I just don't know. All right. So then she goes to work for Cosmo. She writes a very insulting article about women's wear daily, which I think is about clothes. Again, she's threatened with a lawsuit. The 1970s, she rewrites a script, although it was not used for All the President's Men. She writes this along with her husband. But, okay, it wasn't used, but someone sees something in her writing style and she gets to work on her first screenwriting job, which is to co-script the film Silkwood, which comes out in 1983, the same year that Heartburn is published. She is on a roll, baby, right? In 1986, we have we find her writing the book When Harry Met Sally. I believe in 86, the film for Heartburn comes out too. Then in 1989, there is a film released at When Harry Met Sally. It's directed by Rob Reiner. It stars Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. If you remember the scene in Katz's Deli with Meg Ryan, you can thank Meg for making the suggestion for that little scene, because that was her idea.
Okay.
And then you can thank Billy Crystal for the I'll have what she's having line uttered by Rob Reiner's mom, who had no appearance. So a lot of talent in that film. Okay, let's see. Awards, nominations, awards. And then in 92, she has her directorial debut of a book you may have read, This Is My Life. that she wrote with her sister. It was based on the Meg Wolitzer novel. She directed and co-ed wrote in 93, Sleepless in Seattle. More awards, more awards. Then 98, You Got Mail. She also wrote that with Delia and directed. And guess what? I don't know about you, but I loved that film. I thought it was so clever. I loved the story. And I found out it was an adaptation of a film that came out in 1940 that was called, quote, The Shop Around the Corner. Evidently, according to the American Film Institute, which maybe I should know about, but I don't, but I do now. This film is listed as one of the 100 greatest love stories in American cinema. And I didn't end there, because then I found, I don't know why, but there's this whole red Volkswagen thing going on in my life now. I have two people in my life that are Hungarian. And so now I see a connection to I have three people, and I see connections to everything now goes to Hungary. Like the entire cultural world started there. I don't know if it was the Habsburg Empire. I don't know if it was paprika. I don't know what the hell it was, but everything that's really cool seems like sprout from there. But I digress. In 1937, there was a play performed in Budapest called Perfumerie or Parfumer by Miklos Laszlo. In the attempt to avoid regional politics that were brewing up to World War II, this film is about two employees at a leather goods shop in Budapest who can barely stand one another, not realizing that they are falling in love with one another as anonymous correspondence through letter writing. So You Got Mail, which, was such a 90s thing, we can trace to the 40s and then the 1930s, and obviously Budapest, where everything that's cool ever happened. All right, so that's that. In 2002, we again have cross-pollination with the group and Mary McCarthy, because she writes a play called Imaginary Friends that explores the rivalry between Hellman and McCarthy. More awards. Then you may remember in 2009, she directed and co-wrote, again, we have Meryl Streep, Julie and Julia, based on a blog that this woman made about going through Julia. Look at that. Oh, that's lovely. Oh my God. Okay. Going through going through her cookbook. Where am I now? All right. Okay. Then 9, 10. Then she writes Love, Loss, and What I Wore, a play based on Eileen Beckman's book. She does it with Delia. And it is a memoir about clothing worn at pivotal moments in her life. And then, anyway, it's unapologetically low tech. What I Wore was performed by a cast of 5 engaging actresses, reading off music stands, a sort of vagina monologues meets What Not to Wear. Okay, then I'm going to jump to her, to Deep Throat. She knew who Deep Throat was. And I'm thinking our Mark may be a dig at Mark Felt, who was Deep Throat. I don't know. I didn't read that anywhere. I'm just kind of doing that because Bernstein said it stood for my friend when he, the MF who he refers to. But I'm thinking Mark's last name is Feldman in our book. I can't remember. But anyway, she says that no one would believe her. Quote, I would give speeches to 500 people and someone would say, do you know who Deep Throat is? And I would say, it's Mark Felt. She says, classmate of Jacob Bernstein at the Dalton School and Vassar College recalled Jacob, revealing that Felt was Deep Throat, but it caused very little media attention during the years. And she said, no one apart from my sons believed me. So she said, for many years, I have lived with the secret of Deep Throat's identity. And this is from an article from the Huffington Post, 2008. It has been hell, and I have dealt with the situation by telling pretty much everyone who asked me, including strangers, who Deep Throat was. Not for nothing is indiscretion my middle name. I'm so sad she's not with us. Don't you love her? I mean, she's got moxie. Anyway, she was diagnosed with, I'm not going to pronounce it wrong, myelodysplasia, abnormal development of spinal cord, the bone marrow, inadequate production of bone marrow in the blood cells. It sounds like some kind of bone cancer. She did not share this with anyone. Why? She certainly shares everything else, right? She feared the knowledge would impede her career, making it impossible to get projects financed or insured. Practical. She's a practical woman. Okay. Then I'm sure it's addressed, Diana, in the documentary. I found an article from 2013 in the Wrap, and it says entitled Nora Ephron's son explains mother's decision to keep quiet about the illness. It was, let's see, she decided not to tell anyone, just like her friend Christopher Hitchens kept his cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
Why? Her son, Jacob Bernstein, writes an article in the New York Times that he said Ephron was worried that, quote, coming clean would have a bad effect on her career. Quote, certainly she would continue writing books and essays, Bernstein writes, but getting a movie made would be impossible because no insurance company would sign off on it. Arguably, she could do a play, but bringing it to Broadway would be difficult, given that the development process takes years. She also felt it would be, quote, a conversation killer. What my mother didn't want was to have her, I'm getting goosebumps. What her mother didn't want was to have her illness define her, turning every conversation into a series of, how are you? Bernstein writes, right? I've done that. How are you? Like, maybe people don't want that. So anyway, very interesting. And then he ends the article with everything is copy indeed, which I thought was a nice nod to the documentary. Okay, trivia. As an actress, Nora Ephron appeared in two of my favorite films made by her friend, Woody Allen. She is credited with being a wedding guest in Crimes and Misdemeanors and a dinner party guest in Husbands and Wives.
Oh.
Which are both, well, not so much Crimes and Misdemeanors, but, well, maybe so much Crimes and Misdemeanors, but definitely Husbands and Wives. These are films about betrayal.
Yeah.
And wealthy people who do have a lot of really sophisticated parties. I mean, I love watching those films just because you could put it on mute. I could just watch all the shoulder pads and the mauve and, all the 80s. And that's fun in and of itself on its own, right? Oh my goodness. I'm talking way too much. I want to wrap with one of her quotes that I thought in the book that I thought was so great. Although I could go through every quote if you really want it. Insane people are always sure they're just fine. It's only the sane people who are willing to admit they're crazy. Unquote.